Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we're taking a look at pattern maker's vices. Ooh, what exactly is a pattern maker's vice? Let's dive in. So I did a video earlier showing installing this vise, and I'll leave a link to that down below if you didn't see it. This is a lot of fun, and it is a cool vise that can do a lot of things, but it brought up a lot of questions. So I'm gonna try and answer some of those. So first and foremost, what exactly is a pattern maker? The easy answer is that the pattern maker makes patterns. So what exactly is a pattern? Nowadays, if we want to cast something organic, like this leg or the seat or the flywheel or this weird shape here, we probably 3D print it. And then we can put that in sand and cast it. And that works out really well. Problem is, back when things like this were made, 3D printers didn't exist. The 3D printer of the 1800s was the pattern maker. They could make ornate shaped things like this that have no straight edge. They're completely organic in every curve. Whether it be something like a flywheel or the seat or this leg or the bar, every single piece on here has to be cast. And so every single one of these needs to have a pattern that can then be cast. If you look around the shop, you are surrounded by castings. Every one of these planes has a casting. My squares all have a casting on the beam. Specialty planes are covered in little castings. I mean, even the pattern maker's vise themselves are made out of a bunch of castings. And up until very recently, if a company needed something cast, they needed to hire a pattern maker to make the pattern. And the pattern maker would go back to the shop and they would make the pattern to be cast and they would size it and they'd say, is this okay, is this not? They'd go back and make changes. And they were the original 3D printer. Once it was all done, then they could take that pattern and cast it again and again and again. Pattern makers had an amazing amount of knowledge and experience. Not only did the pattern maker have to understand the molding process so that they could put it into the mold and take it out without disturbing it and then have a good cast come out of it. They also had to understand shrinkage, and they had to make the pattern a little larger so that when the item shrunk, it would actually be the correct size. There are so many little things that went into it. And above all, every casting is a weird shape. As a jointer or a cabinet maker, we love working with rectangular surfaces. They're really easy. They're simple to clamp, they're simple to work with, you can measure off of a side. Rectangles and squares are very easy to work with. Yeah, occasionally we'll get into a slight curve to accentuate something, but most of the time, it's a rectangle. Pattern makers couldn't do that. They had to work with weird organic shapes. And because of that, it's really hard to fit some of these odd things into a vise. If I was working on a pattern for this and I had to clamp it in here, I could clamp it like this, but that is going to bend it because it's not direct support. I mean, I could put backing in there, but that would require a lot of other things in there. And then if I need to rotate it, there's no good way of any one spot of clamping something like this. Especially if it's wood, it's going to flex around a lot. I could make my clamping surface smaller by putting a vise in the clamp. And with this, now I can clamp down on one particular spot. But then this whole thing becomes kind of flimsy because it's in one spot. It's really easy to move it around. Not to mention, if I want to use this vise, it's vertical. I can't rotate it down to an angle like this. I can't move it back and forth. I'm locked at this particular angle. A pattern maker's vise, though, has no such limitations. I can put this at any angle or orientation that I would like, and I can clamp different things at different sizes and different spots. If I just want a small clamping force, I can use the small jaws. This would allow me to connect small things, or if I want them to be a little bigger, I can loosen it up. I can bring these jaws around, and now I can clamp a little larger space in here. If the sides of my pieces aren't perfectly parallel, now I've got this adjustment and I can take these jaws out of parallel. Now I can clamp on something thicker in the middle and thinner on the outside. So this comes down and gives me a very solid connection here where this isn't going to move around and I'm putting more even pressure on it because these are pivoted. If one axis of rotation is not enough, it also comes with a plate that I can put in here. I can install in this little jaw here. And now I can do compound angles. So I can actually go in and clamp really weird shapes. Also with that same groove in there, I can now put in rods and poles and pipes, and I can have that same strength on here, but this time with a rotational strength because I'm not just connecting at 2 points, I'm actually wrapping around the pipe a little bit. Next, it's got dogs that can pop up. And so now I can clamp something across the surface of my bench just like I would with an end device. But you know what? 2 dogs aren't enough. I want 4! And with 4 dogs, you can clamp a circular object or have something parallel or not parallel between your connections. So with the dogs, you can clamp weird organic shapes and find the best orientation for locking this down. And like that, I've got a really good solid connection where that ain't going nowhere. Underneath, you can see how this works. This lever loosens up, and now I can rotate the head up and down. And then I've got this lever that allows me to lock it in so I can't rotate the head. I can loosen this, and then I can rotate the head. This one is an Emirates vise, and it's one of the last ones they made. It is generally considered to be the name brand when it comes to pattern maker's vices. But this one over here, this is an Oliver. It's kind of a smaller company. They didn't make quite as many, but if I had a preference between the two, I'd probably go with Oliver over an Emirates vise. Honestly though, they're both about the same, just slightly different ways of doing the exact same thing. Such as the pivoting of the top head on the Oliver was done with a series of screws. You run them together, and this allows you to actually lock the head in a little bit better. I kind of like that, but it is a little bit slower than the lever on the Emirates. As to pricing, yeah, they're expensive. Small ones like this, you're usually going to be spending around $600 for one that has all the parts. Might need a little bit of work there. For the larger ones, you're probably going to be spending around $1,000 or more. And these don't come around that often. If you want to buy them new, there's only one source I know of right now, and that's H&T Gordon. I'll leave a link to them down below. They make one that's a little bit smaller than this one, but it's a little bit different design. I kind of like it, although I've never had a chance to play with it. So one of these days I might. But it's expensive. So yeah, I'll leave a link to that down below and you can take a look at it. One of the questions I had for this one is in the installation, I kept it locked in, so I can't rotate it right now with the head down. I have to lift it up. Once it's up, then I can loosen it and I can rotate it and I can bring it back down. Now I could actually cut out a little bit more circumference in this so it can rotate. It's not, probably would take me another 30-40 minutes. But at the time installing it, I just chopped out a whole bunch of my bench. I really didn't want to chop off that much more. It won't weaken the bench at all. It's just more time. And if I ever need to be able to rotate it down, then I'll go ahead and do that work, but until then, it's good enough. So that's why I didn't actually chop it out all the way, so I can't rotate it while it's down. You'll also commonly see it, so this is out from the bench. In other words, I would move it out another 2.5 inches out this way. The reason I didn't do that is all of the designs for both the Oliver and the Emirates, even if you look at the salesman sample, they're recessed into the bench. And the reason for that is you want to be able to use this flush face of the bench. If you have a longer board that you want to be able to attach farther out on the bench, this needs to be flush. If this is pulled out, you can't do that easily. Yeah, you can put blacker boards out farther, but this is the simple way to do it. The problem with insetting it into the bench is it's going to take a lot more work. You have to do all of that precision chopping, and it's a lot of work. So that's why most people just leave it out a little ways. The other reason I wanted to recess it in is just this face out here. This one is my thinnest one, so it stays back. This is a Hovarder vise. I have a couple videos on that one. This one is medium, and then this one's got the big wooden hub that sticks out a long ways. If I'm walking along the bench, having these in a little bit more is nice. If I were to pull this one out 2.5 inches, it would come out even farther than this thing over here. So having it in just clears up the bench face a little bit better. So now the big question. Do you need a pattern maker's vise to do woodworking? Absolutely not. For most joinery and cabinet working, this really isn't the best vise for it. It has its bonuses, but it's really focused on the organic and the weird shapes. It doesn't do rectangles incredibly well. Yes, it does do them, but honestly, I would rather have an end face vise than have one of these as the standard bench. I would much rather have a leg vise than this. But if you find yourself doing a lot of organic and weird shapes, that might be worth the money, because this can hold things that a regular vise just can't, or has a lot of hard time doing it. There aren't many applications for this for the jointer or the cabinet maker. But if you do want to get into pattern making, there's a reason it's called a pattern maker's vise. The pattern maker had a whole bunch of fun tools to make weird things. The most famous is the pattern maker's vise, though there are crank handle chisels and things like that that were really well known for pattern making. The vise, just being the biggest and boldest, is the one that everyone looks at. So there's a quick dive into pattern makers' vices. And yeah, it's an interesting topic. It's one of those that you could keep talking about for a while, because there's a lot of history that goes in this, and the whole job of being a pattern maker has some really interesting tools and fun features and things to make weird, intricate shapes rather simply. I know I didn't answer all of the questions, so if you have anything particular, let me know that down in the comments down below. I do read through all the questions. I answer as many of them as I can get to. And on top of that, it does actually help us out. Anytime you put a comment down below, even if it's just comment down below, thank you. You are helping grow this channel. You're helping us get in front of more people. You're helping the algorithm. That means a lot. As well as the like, the share, the subscribe, you know how that works. If you want to take it one step farther, there are a bunch of names over here. Those are all the people on Patreon. Patrons and members here on the channel are the ones who keep us going. We are sponsored by you. You get to be the one running the ads rather than the ad company running the ads. So thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more about that, then go down below, click the little patron or click the join button down here and become a member here on YouTube. We have special perks for both. And I think that'll do it for now. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Unfortunately, if you wanted a career as a pattern maker, you're probably not going to be able to find a wife. And that's because all women know that pattern makers have the biggest vices.